Today on CityCast DC, one of my goals for 2024 is to check out more new local music, but finding it can be tough. Like, where do you start? Christopher Noem co-founded Listen Local First to support DC's homegrown music scene, and he's here to share tips and tricks for making the most of it. Today's Wednesday, January 3rd. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. So Chris, since the pandemic, there's been a real proliferation of smaller music venues. What has it been like to see venues like the Black Cat really grow into what they are now?
So what the pandemic has done is actually it was really terrible for the music economy, because any successful music economy is built on what we call a pyramid. So you've got your biggest venues at the top. Then you have your small venues, your 1,000, 800, 600 cap venues. Then you've got your really small venues of the event. And the same thing, you have the largest number of small venues, anywhere from 100 to 300. And what we saw during the pandemic, even though there are a couple of venues that have come up, we lost about 15 venues during the pandemic. So that took a giant chunk out of the base of our music ecosystem and our venue ecosystem. So unfortunately, a lot of those venues catered to jazz, soul, funk. They were the small spaces. They were the community spaces. And so I think what that has done is create a gaping hole within the community and really thrown the balance off for the venue ecosystem. So yes, we do have some opportunities, and there are some new venues that are coming online now that are really impressive, and they're trying to do great work. But I think the damage that we incurred during the pandemic is going to take a decade or more to get back those spaces that were so valued to the community.
Yeah, I have been going to Twins, the jazz club, since I was a child. My dad took me there pretty much my whole life, and it broke my heart to see that place shut its doors.
So sad. And that was really a staple of the jazz community, and as well as a number of places. That corridor was, Marvin was really getting into it. You had BIN 1301. You had a number of places further down on U Street. And then, Soto was a great jazz spot. All of those places folded. So it's really sad. I'm happy to see that there are a number of places coming back that are taking some of the spaces. But yeah, we're not going to get Twins back, which is sad.
So given where we are with this shifting ecosystem of local music in DC, what are some of your favorite smaller spots that folks should know about?
So I love different venues for different reasons. Huge fan of DC9 just because of the sort of indie acts they pull through. The sound is really good in the space. I love the Pie Shop because they're family owned. They really support local musicians. They do a lot for local bands for all sorts of genres. They're really trying really unique programming there. Same goes with the Pocket too. I mean, really, that is like the stepping stone for any artist that wants to come up and play. You play the Pocket, you play a small room, you build a fan base, you go on to the next level. And I just also really love Songbird because I think they're that sort of in-between venue size where the next step up is the Black Cat, is the Hamilton, is sort of like a bigger, even like a Union Stage. Those are some that I really like in the smaller venues, but each venue plays such an important role in the ecosystem. And actually from the specific, either what the genres they support or the way they support local music or the showcases they support, I think they're all incredible in their own way.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I feel like small venues, like some of the ones that you've mentioned, are where a lot of local bands in DC get their start. But even that kind of requires a level of exposure and effort from audiences and listeners. So I can understand why folks might be like something like a Porch Fest, which DC has, might be an easier lift to finding local music. What do you think about Porch Fest? You can be honest.
Well, no. I think so. So every sort of festival event has their space in the broader ecosystem. I mean, Porch Fest is a good way to get people out to experience sort of new bands that are starting out. So that is a good way to get that initial fan base, get in front of people that you've never seen before. But, that's not a place that someone wants to get paid for their music would necessarily go. And it's important when we think about the arts in this community, we think about there is, as an artist, if you want to pursue your art as a way of life, we have to talk about like making a living. And there are plenty of musician-driven events. Like if you're a songwriter, you can play the 9, songwriter series and try to get on those. You can try and get on a So Far sound show. You can apply for these things. There are a number of other collectives that do these events. They're more like traveling open mics or just like showcases where people can get on. And it's hard because there's not a lot of opportunities. But, really getting to know the community, getting to know the people, getting to know some of the venue owners, like, so if they like you and if, say they might have an opening, it's maybe a little bit, it's a little pay for like an opening act, but that'll be your first opportunity. That's your opportunity for the venue to see you perform, see how you perform in that setting, and then if you have a good experience in one space, that word sort of travels within the community.
So how can folks discover local music? It can seem hard. I feel like I'm a little bit like out of the scene. It makes me feel old. How can folks like me find new local music?
Oh, it's gotten a lot harder because we used to have a pretty thriving local art media scene or media art scene. And so you had all the papers had music blogs, or there were a number of different music blogs and sites. But those, as we know, like journalism is hard. And you just see folks close down their site that was focusing on local music. So that's been kind of sad. So it's, I think it's hard to navigate now. There's a couple sites like, you can always check out like what the Post and the DCS are doing in terms of like highlighting local music. Check out folks like Hometown Sounds. But I think a good thing is like getting out to experience live music. And I really like the DC Music Live app because that's basically created a show list. So if you want to see any show going on any given night, you can go to DC Music Live. You can see any show that's happening at any venue across town that night. And you can sort by like neighborhood and you can access shows that way. I also say if you find an artist that you like, go in and see who they've played shows with locally, because that's often expands your network of music. So you see a band that you like, you go on their social media, you're like, oh, look, last week they played a show with these other 2 bands. And like maybe that allows you to expand your network that way.
So what local showcases do you recommend?
In terms of local showcases, I mean, you've got the Boundary Stone Jam that happens like a couple times a month where they have, a folk artist come on and he sort of leads and chooses a number of artists to come up. And there's also any given number of venues like DC9 will host an artist for the whole month. They'll do like every Monday this artist performs and brings in a bunch of guests and performers. So it's kind of like a residency. You'll have venues do that. You've got the AV sessions, which happens at the Pie Shop once a month and showcase different local talent, specifically up and coming local talent, which is really special. And I'd say there are a number of local, festivals and showcases like the H3 Festival, and I'd say smaller local festivals that do a good job of highlighting local acts. But I guess the takeaway is we just need more of these. We need more local versions, local showcases, more collectives doing more events, because there's definitely an appetite for it.
Chris, how did you become someone who cares so deeply about the vibe of the music scene in DC?
I'm a music lover. When I first moved down here, probably 15 years ago, I was trying to get to multiple shows a week. I think at some point I was going to maybe 3 or 4 shows a week. So just getting out there and getting to see music was something that was really important to me. I was lucky to be able to work with a couple organizations that did a lot of work with the independent music labels and do work on music advocacy and research and education early in my time in DC. And that really connected me to the music community. And that led to the launch of Listen Local First, which is a music initiative that's been around now for about 12 years. Sort of the whole idea is about creating new opportunities for local music engagement, local music activation, connecting artists with fans and fans with artists. That was really the way that I was able to connect deeper and use my skills and policy and advocacy to be able to help with the music community.
You said that you've been part of this community for 12 years. What do you think is most important in keeping it alive?
I think it's important that we have people that, that we continue to grow community and understand that the local government provides all these tools, to support these efforts. And many of the festival organizers throughout the city get grants, and many artists get grants from the DC Commission of the Arts and Humanities. So I'd also beg all the listeners and podcasters and journalists and anyone, there are grants out there that the commission gives to folks to be able to do their work. And it's one of the biggest state arts agencies in the country. And I think folks should connect with DCCH, follow them on social media, and learn about all the grant opportunities, because there's tons of them. Unfortunately, the fiscal year ends at the end of September, so we're coming to the end of our fiscal year. But starting, in October and November, the new grant cycle starts for the following year.
So, what do you think makes the local music scene in DC different from other places?
So, I think the local music scene in DC is so special because there is a tremendous amount of history and knowledge and culture behind the scene and behind the artists that have made DC home for so long. So I think it's important when you go down to a neighborhood like U Street and you walk around and you see all these old spaces, it's important to understand this was the home of Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, some of the most amazing jazz artists of the world. This was where they played. This is where, home of protests came here and artists came here, and the importance of the creation and what role DC played in any given genre. I mean, you have one of the biggest movements in punk and hardcore started here. And then you take a deep dive back into folk and you look at DC was home of one of the first bluegrass pirate radio stations in the country. All of these genres that you may have a home in DC, and it's really interesting if you want to take that dive to see how DC played an impact on that music that you love. And I think if you do that and you take that dive, then each artist and each art form, whether they're from here or they came here, they're inspired by something, they are connected to something that is part of the lifeblood of the city. And I think that makes exploring the scene fascinating and so exciting, and there's endless opportunity to continue to learn more.
Chris, thank you so much for being here. This was great.
Thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, tell somebody that you can't wait to see live music with. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.